So today I want to talk about the Major Arcana, the major secrets of the soul's journey. So there are 22 Major Arcana trump cards in the deck, 22 major secrets of the soul's journey. The soul starts out as the Fool and ends with the World, and we're going to talk about that. These cards very much did appear in northern Italy in the 1400s as a game known as tarocchi. It was an Italian game, also known as tarot cards, and it was very much for the upper class, wealthier families. Families who would have had access to the esoteric teachings that most people don't realize are even woven into the religions that people worship and preach and follow and believe today. Wealthy families would commission elaborate decks to be made, and they were made with medieval figures and symbols that they would have been familiar with. The Fool, Magician, Tower, and so on. Tarot cards, however, were not associated with mysticism or the occult until much later in the 1700s when a man named Antoine claimed that they held divine wisdom from Egypt. And the most influential tarot card deck that we do have and possess today is very much the 1909 Rider-Waite-Smith deck that I do have here today and that we are going to be using to show you the symbolism. And one of the most fascinating things about the Major Arcana is that the cards do not exist in isolation across centuries. Mystics, philosophers, astrologers, alchemists, Kabbalists, and even biblical interpreters have noticed reoccurring patterns showing up in different symbolic systems. And so how the tarot cards work, it's very much you have the Fool up top because that's the soul. The soul is just innocent and pure, okay? And then it starts going on this journey. And the first journey is the physical plane, and then it's the mental plane, and then it's the spiritual plane. But most people never get past the physical plane, and that's why also most people haven't even mastered their body. Most people have not even learned to master their chariot, let alone their mental mindset, and then let alone their spiritual gifts. But the soul is meant to go through all of them to commit to self-mastery. But before we talk about the first plane, the physical plane, with numbers 1 through 7, I want to talk about the Fool. Because the Fool is us. The Fool is the soul, innocent, naive, yet speaks the truth. The soul always knows the truth, even if it has mind blocks in the subconscious. And the number 0 has no beginning, no end. We have no beginning, no end. We are eternal beings. If you notice, he very much is going on his way. He's innocent. He's looking ahead, taking the journey. He has the dawning of the day, the yellow sky behind him. He has the red feather. The red represents vitality and passions. And he's carrying a sack. He's not without burdens. He's not without weight of things that he came onto this journey with, that he's beginning on. So the Fool is very much us, the soul, going on the journey. And the first layer and the first plane that we're going to talk about is very much the physical plane, learning to be human. Okay, we are learning to be human. We're learning to realize the power that we have as humans. And the first 7 cards in this lineup very much deal with identity, embodiment, relationships, and navigating the external world. And so coming in at number 1 on the physical plane is in fact the Magician, and this is I Am. It is here that the soul awakens to the ability to create and influence reality. Here we discover willpower, action, and personal agency. The lesson with the Magician is that I have power. But sadly, so many people go through their lives not even realizing that they do have power. Most people like to blame and they stay in victim mode, but the Bible says what? Ye are gods. Jesus said it in the parables. And he was referencing the Old Testament. Now, most Christians will say, oh, that's Satan's teaching, because they've been so indoctrinated with beliefs to believe that they're powerless, that there's nobody greater than the deity of that religion. Jesus said, ye are gods, because you do have the power. You have been given the power and authority, and you are the bridge between heaven and earth to create from the spiritual realm, to bring it into the mental realm, to then take it into the physical realm. And if you look at the card, I'll put it up on screen, you very much see that he has all the elements on his table. He has the pentacle, he has the cup, he has the sword, and he has the wand. And he very much does represent Mercury and the element air of inspiration and possibility and creative energy. He also has red roses, which symbolize passion and action and desire. They represent the life force, courage, and physical effort needed to bring ideas into the real world. And he also has white lilies. Lilies symbolize purity and innocence and the clear intention. They represent the spiritual connection in the uncorrupted mind directing the Magician's power. And together, both of the flowers represent the culture of aspiration. Just as a gardener would tend to plants, the Magician tends to his thoughts and his will to have focus to then bring those creations into reality. Because you very much, as the Magician's cards say, you can make your imagination real. The second card is the High Priestess, which is very much, I feel, learning to trust your intuition. Here the soul very much does encounter intuition in the unconscious. It begins learning that not everything can be known through logic alone, and the lesson here is there is wisdom beyond what I can see. And if you notice on the card, she has a lot of unconscious symbolism. She has the moon symbolism. She has the triple crown of the moon, you know, the mother, the maiden, the crone. She has the water flowing down, the moon crescent at her feet. She has the Torah peeking out of her robes. And she's also sitting between two pillars, Boaz and Jachin. In his strength, and he will establish also a callback to the Temple of Solomon. Okay, and behind her, she has pomegranates. Pomegranates represent Persephone, the goddess between realms. And if you remember the Greek story, she spent half of her time above, and then she spent half of her time in the underworld. You too need to spend time in your unconscious. You need to become familiar. But you need to realize that in order to gain wisdom, you have to begin trusting your own counsel. You have to start building that trust with yourself and building that intuition and that knowing. And you also have to realize that wisdom will cut. Wisdom will require you to be honest with yourself. Wisdom is not nice, and that is why some people like to stay ignorant and they never go into the temple. They stay outside. But as Jesus said, you wicked lawyers, you have taken the keys and you yourselves will not enter. You're supposed to be entering in. The next card is the Empress of I Create, where the magician realizes he has power and the High Priestess begins trusting her own intuition. The Empress goes on to say, I have self-expression, and this is where it's going to begin emerging. She's very much about fertility and abundance, ruled by Venus. She's often portrayed as pregnant, and like all the other major arcana and major playing cards, she has a hat. Well, hers is a crown, and it has the 12 stars representing the 12 zodiac. She is the great mother. She has them all, because crowns and hats very much do represent maturity, conscious direction, and the spiritual maturity of the soul. You realize the authority has been given to you. That anointing has been put on your head. You know, you're anointed with oil. Your anointing is Christ. That's your identity. You realize who you are. You know, you are the Atman, the eternal soul, and you now realize that you have been given that creative authority to self-express in the way that you wish to. She also has a full harvest of wheat. She has the vitality and the passion of red, and she also has pomegranates on her dress. And the lesson ultimately of the Empress is life flows through me. This is where you very much begin realizing that you are not separate from source. You are very much connected to source, and very much you are like a branch on the vine, as the Bible would say, and you start channeling that life flow, and you realize that life comes from you, not at you. The next one I want to talk about is the Emperor, where you just had the Empress, now you have the Emperor, which is I build. Structure becomes necessary. You need to learn to have healthy boundaries, discipline, responsibility, and order begins to take shape, because the lesson here is power requires stewardship. And if you see in his right hand, he has the Ankh, which is an Egyptian fertility symbol. It's their version of the cross, you know, before we ever had a pole. And then the Latin cross, we very much had the Egyptian cross. He has the rams because he's very much ruled by Aries and fire. And he also has armor underneath his robe that he's wearing, you know, his clothes, because you need to be able to protect what is yours. You need to have healthy boundaries in your life. This is where you have to realize that you are not being rude, putting down energetic boundaries to protect yourself and what you're creating. Because while the Emperor is rigid and stern, he ultimately is the thing that governs and sustains life and the life force. And if you also notice in his hand, he does have a golden orb, which represents the earth and his dominion over it. So the next one is the Hierophant. I belong. And this is where the soul very much begins to encounter cultures and religion and family systems and understandings of inherited beliefs. And the lesson is, what have I been taught? You need to understand your boundaries, your values, and your belief systems, because the Hierophant is the mediator between the divine and everyday life. You are a bridge between heaven and earth. And one of my favorite things about this card is the symbolism of the wand with the 3 lines, and that is talking about the 3 existing planes. We are spiritual beings having a human experience, and we exist on 3 planes. The physical, the mental, and the spiritual. And then you can go on to a 4th plane known as the astral. And true wisdom, the symbol, what this means is that true wisdom requires integration of all 3 planes. You cannot just be physically strong or mentally strong. You need to also be spiritually strong. You need to have that true wisdom and gain that understanding and knowledge and bring all 3 in harmony and move through them simultaneously in your everyday life. The next card is the Lovers, which is I choose. The soul here begins encountering true authentic values from inherited beliefs and programming. And the lesson that the soul learns on here is, who am I when I choose for myself? Remember Adam and Eve, that's who's represented here. The Gemini, you know, the twins, you have the snake, she ate from the tree. She chose to eat from the tree. She chose for herself with her free will, because you have free will. Now, you might have inherited beliefs, oh, you can't do that, but who says you can't? Wisdom, the snake, that guidance, that feminine inside of you will say, are you sure? It will challenge the inherited beliefs that you've been told. And then above, you do have Raphael, who is the ruler and associated with air, because angels are archetypes for zodiac symbolisms, and then the demons are the shadow side of things, because we do have a shadow side and a light side to everything, good and evil. It's been there since the beginning. You know, you have Set, who would come out at sunset, and you have Horus, who is the ruler of the sky, the risen savior of the world, Horizon. Either way, this is a card about choosing. Then also, of course, since it is the Lovers, it is about love. And the final card for our physical plane is very much the Chariot. I direct my life. If you've been following along, you know I've used this phrase before. You need to learn to harness and master your chariot, because the physical self needs to gain mastery. Because opposing forces here are very much brought into alignment. You bring your thoughts and your emotions into alignment, because the lesson is my life moves where my attention goes. Where my attention goes, my energy flows. And as you see, he very much has a wand, just like that one, that one, that one, that one. And also even Jesus in some of the old archetype paintings of him has a wand. He was seen as a magician, because wands very much represent the manifestation of will. So here, the charioteer, which you are the charioteer, okay, you very much hold that manifestation of your will, and you move your chariot through creative force, and the wand is very much for your subjective consciousness. You also see that you very much have the Indian symbols for the female and male reproductive systems representing the gender. You know, you're supposed to bring your two hemispheres. You're supposed to bring the masculine and the feminine together in harmony inside of you. And the last symbol I want to make note on here is very much the Sphinx. As you see, it is a callback to the pillars, yin and yang, left and right, masculine and feminine. Okay, and if you notice, they are not connected to the chariot, because they very much are the mystery that the charioteer explores. As we also learn to begin to play with reality of yin and yang, because that is how we create that free will of consciousness. Now, all of these together create very much the physical plane. In the first 7 cards, they begin to ask and answer the questions, who am I? What can I create? What do I believe? And what direction will I take? Because the soul here learns to function as an individual. That is the lesson that we are learning on the first plane of reality. To embrace your individuality and to start to create a life that you want by mastering yourself and understanding your beliefs and boundaries, and learning to protect them and own your space with confidence, to take up space, to not abandon yourself, to make yourself smaller, and then to celebrate the love in your life, to celebrate the love that you give to yourself. And now we move on to the mental plane of learning to know thyself. And I actually have a video about that if you want to check that out. But once the soul establishes an identity of who am I and what do I want to create, the soul turns inward. And it begins to master the self and master the mind. You know, you want to be a master of your house, as the Bible says. And the first one of that is strength. And the lesson is, I master myself. But true power is discovered to be inner rather than external. And the lesson here is gentleness often overcomes force. Having grace and love for yourself rather than condemnation and hate and criticism will get you a lot farther, because strength doesn't come from one figure over the other. It comes from harmony and balance between the two, and very much as you see, looking down, looking up, she does not overcome him with the intellect, and he does not overcome her with the passion and fire. They are equals, just like you have equals, you have equals, you have pillars, equality, balance. And because they find balance with each other, they very much can exist in harmony without violence. And the affinity symbol here, I do want to make note, is very much withholding and preventing things from happening rather than creating things from happening. So the magician creates things and moves it forward, where she prevents violence from happening using her intellect and wisdom, that feminine. The next card is the Hermit. I seek. The soul withdraws from noise and begins looking for truth directly. You might see this showing up as in Jesus goes into the wilderness. He withdraws from the noise to go into prayer and fasting. The lesson is the answers are within. You are never disconnected from source. And when you get quiet away from the noise of the world, you hear. Be still and know that I am God. And in order to travel to the wilderness, as you can see, he very much has a lantern. And the lantern he holds in his right hand, and it reveals just what is ahead of him. The Bible says the word is a light unto your path. because you always have the answers within you and it will guide you every step of the way on your journey. And then if you look very closely in it, it is the 6-pointed star, the seal of Solomon, which is a symbol of the Hermit's individual wisdom. The drive behind the Hermit, much like the High Priestess, is intellect. As you can see, we're starting to kind of have the symbols go down the planes. As I say, they kind of overlap and they go from the physical to the mental to the spiritual. However, he uses his intellect to travel the world instead of remaining in a temple. Next up, we have the Wheel of Fortune, which is I observe patterns. Life cycles here very much become visible, and the soul very much begins recognizing cause and effect, and the lesson is everything moves in cycles and seasons. And this one actually has a lot of cool symbolism. So to go over a few real quick, we do have Egyptian callback symbols. We have Set and Anubis, again, balancing each other out, that equilibrium. We want to always have balance. You have the 4 corners of the mind, the eagle, the man, the ox, and the lion. You very much have the Sphinx. And also something really cool is on the wheel, you have Torah. As you see, you have Torah here, very much going back to, let's say, the Torah as in found in like the Hebrew Bible of things. Or you also have Rata, which is the Latin word for wheel. And then you also have the Hebrew spelling out for Yahweh or Tetragrammaton, the unspeakable name of God, which plays into the mystery also of the Sphinx. So that's really cool. Next, we have Lady Justice, which is I become accountable. The soul here very much learns that actions do in fact create consequences, and that's actually the lesson. What I sow, I reap. And if you notice, it's very much ruled by Libra, which is the scales. The Justice is holding scales in her hands, and she also has one hand pointing up and one hand pointing down. A callback to the Magician of as above, so below, representing that we should be the same on heaven as we are on earth. Let your yes be your yes. Whatever you bind in heaven, you bind on earth. And whatever you loose in heaven, you loose in earth. The Bible says, because it very much is, use your intuition to set your moral compass. Because things are a lot more gray in our world than we care to admit. And sometimes, especially because of religion, people think that they're morally right and they're morally doing good, when in fact, their beliefs have become so hardened that they're actually doing morally evil. Look at Christian nationalism. I'm going to just leave it at that. If you're interested, though, in a more philosophy of that, check out Genealogy of Morals by Nietzsche. It's a very great book. Next is the Hangman of I surrender, and this is where the ego's need for control begins dissolving. When you first begin on your spiritual journey and you wake up and you realize that you're kind of separate from your thoughts, at times it can feel as if you're fighting against yourself. You know, you're wrestling with that ego and it's not wanting to give up control. But this is where the ego begins working with you and for you rather than against you. And this is very much the lesson. A new perspective changes everything. Now you'll notice he's hanging upside down, and this very much is a mythological representation of the wizard Merlin or the Norse god Odin, who were said to sleep upside down to get a different perspective on life. You'll also notice that his legs make the number 4 and that his head and arms make the number 3, both representing the spiritual trinity and then also the material compass realm of things, you know, your cosmic cross. And he also has a golden halo around his head. Now, a golden halo is very much something holy. It's suggesting that he's doing something holy and that instead of avoiding him, we should actually follow him. You'll also probably notice that certain characters and figures throughout history, also Jesus, had a golden halo around his head because that is something holy and that we should follow him, see what he's doing, and replicate it in our own lives and very much look at the world from a different perspective. Card number 13 is very much death, which is I transform. Old identities, attachments, and illusions here very much die because the lesson is in order to become, something must end, something must die. And even though the death and Grim Reaper is kind of seen in the Western light as something evil, it is very much not seen like that in tarot or in Eastern cultures. Skulls and Grim Reapers and death is more seen as a neutrality that is experienced by all. And so even here you see he's very much wearing armor, but he does not come with violence because he's not holding a sword. He actually comes holding a flag showing, hey, I'm just here to take you on to your next journey. And you very much see that, you know, gates of heaven or even a boat to cross. The Greeks have their myth. And all the people have different emotions. One's begging, one's looking away, one's just kind of looking up in awe with neutrality. And even a king is knocked down with his crown because no matter how high we gain in status here, we will eventually end. We will die one day. And so he comes for all because growth always means leaving something behind. Even Jesus talks about that, Matthew 24, the entire world inside of you will end. Your entire old attachments and false identities and illusions you have about yourself and about who you are in your life very much have to come to an end for you to continue on into your next level of consciousness or into the promised land. Finally, since death is number 13th, it does also relate back to the 13th zodiac, the mystic's path, the hidden path, the inner one, because we have the 12 external fixed zodiac, but then you have your 13th, which is very much the inner transformation, the path of the mystics. And you see it showing up across all cultures. And I actually made a video about it. If you want to check it out, it is a part of my inner circle for those that want to go deeper into esoteric topics as they continue on in their spiritual mastery. And it is also a way that supports me in the work that I do. Moving on, however, we're going to talk about temperance. This is very much the fragmented self begins to heal into wholeness. We are supposed to be bringing all aspects of us into wholeness, into completion. We're supposed to go on to perfection. And the lesson here is balance creates harmony. Actually, what the word temperance means in moderation, self-restraint, and the practice of avoiding extremes. A lot of times people, when they are imbalanced and their psyche is fractured, they swing from one side of the pendulum to the next. They either overindulge, in vices and gluttony and lust and all these things, or they underindulge to the point of another extreme with religion. You often see it, especially in old Orthodox sects of, let's say, fundamentalism. They strip somebody of their entire personality and you can't have any fun. Because that was also Augustine of Hippo. When you understand his theology on things, he has the story of the spider where he very much criticized it on, this took me away from my devotion to God. And it was the extremity of that. But we're not supposed to have too much of an extreme of our carnal material nature, of our physical self, and we're not supposed to be too much into our extremities of our spiritual self. We need to bring balance of the two. We need to balance our cross, our physical and our spiritual nature. Or as I like to say, you need to embody love and embrace life. You need to embody that divine love, that spiritual love to the fullest, your divinity to the fullest, and then you need to embrace your life, your humanity to the fullest. You need to have harmony between the two. And being in one or the other too long will make you sick. But going on, you see that you have a trinity, the triangle, and then it's in a square, kind of going back to the hangman. Symbolism does show up, and then there's also a path. So even though temperance here is at rest, we need to continue on with our journey. We need to move on, and then you have the fiery wings of passion and dedication. Because this is the completion of our mental plane. As you see, we have another 7, and that's also why, like I said just a moment ago, you do see the path showing up where even though temperance is at rest, we need to continue on because we have yet to complete our cycle of the spiritual plane. But the mental plane, these cards very much answer and ask of us, what is true? What patterns govern my life? What must I release? How do I become whole? Because in this cycle, the soul very much learns self-awareness and inner mastery. And now we move on to the spiritual plane. Remembering divine oneness. The soul here very much confronts the deepest illusion of the ego, which is separation itself. Because you are not separate from source. There is no separation. You cannot be separate. If God is all, omni, all God had to create everything with was God itself. But the illusions of the mind, of the ego, of bad religion, of high controlled religion, let's say Christianity, very much says what? You're separate from God. And if you don't ask Jesus into your heart to be saved, you're going to be separated for all eternity and burn in the fiery pits of hell. But that's not true. That's bad theology. That's bad theology from early church fathers who wanted to control people. And that is very much our first card, the devil card of I see my chains. The soul here very much becomes aware of attachments and fears, addictions, shame, and false identity. Because the lesson is the prison door was never locked. If you notice, the chains are around their neck, but they're loose. They could remove them at any time, but they think that they're stuck because you are only limited by what you believe is possible. The prison door was never locked. You could move. And if you also notice, you have Adam and Eve, a callback to the lovers, but you also have the vices of drunkenness and lust, the evil vices, those addictions that you have. And I feel like the devil card is sometimes misunderstood. Like death, it's kind of seen as more of an evil symbol, but it's not. Okay, the devil here is very much here to show you. Because ultimately, the devil suggests that something is holding you back. And so when you see the devil card and you're looking at the devil card and you're at this point in your journey, in the soul's journey, you need to realize that there is probably some codependent attachment, be it a substance or a relationship or even a belief, preventing you from performing your best. And so you really need to self-analyze and observe where your motives are coming from. And if they are coming anywhere but from yourself, you need to consider realignment. So if you're doing something for somebody else, if you have other gods before me, you need to remove those things. That's become an idol. And you should not have any idols in your life. If you're just getting a job or going to college or getting married because somebody else told you you should, because that would be successful, that's what you should do, you're not in alignment with your true self. And so you do. You need to really understand what bondage you're carrying in your life because of beliefs and limits and fears and attachments that you're holding on to. Because then that takes you onto the tower, which is what is false falls away. Because the lesson is truth does not fear examination, and every illusion here collapses and is destroyed. The veil has to be removed from your eyes. You cannot live in illusion, or else you're blocking also your chakras and your energy flow. And in the middle of the card, you're going to see a crumbling tower, and this represents a few different things. It first represents the Tower of Babel, humanity's ambitions to go and achieve and the compromises we make to avoid insecurities. These compromises, however, are futile because eventually Icarus very much reaches the sun and our ambitions consume us. Also known as Prometheus, don't let the fire burn your hands. And then you don't know if they're falling or they're flying because, again, that's up for interpretation. Surrounding the tower, I also want to make note that there are very much 22 little gold dots. Numbers mean things, and some have observed the arrangements of the dots. A look like Hebrew letter J, which stands for fire. Others have interpreted the 22 letters to represent the combination of 12 zodiacs and the 10 points of the Kabbalah tree of life, or the 22 Hebrew letters. You also have lightning striking and a crown going off, meaning no matter your ambitions or where you rise in life and how much material world you gain, it will fall away because the soul has to be purified. But then comes the star, which is I hope. After the collapse of the egoic death and all these illusions that fall away, after the end of the world, the birthing pains that are happening and the destruction and the fire and the emotional turmoil and everything painful, after the collapse of our old self comes healing and reconnection to the divine, because the lesson is grace remains. You have to be purified. And that's actually what these symbols on the card, you have a naked woman. She's very much comfortable in her own divinity and her own skin. She has one foot on water, representing the holiness, kind of going back to Jesus walking on water. And you also have the 8-pointed star, which is very much a symbol of purity. And so the star here is very much a beacon guiding the woman to the pond where she can complete the cycle of life. And then also surrounding, you do have 7 stars, and they symbolize very much the Hindu philosophy of the 7 chakras, or 7 heavens, 7 layers, 7 aspects of you. Your energy is in alignment, it is now flowing, it is now pure, and all your dreams are coming true. And after the power and rebirth of the cycles with the star, we enter the mystery with the moon. The soul continues its journey into the unconscious, into fears and the dreams and the hidden aspects of the self. And the lesson is not everything is meant to be understood immediately. The moon card reveals our hidden subconscious, devoid of human figures. It is very much just with our animalistic natures, the wild and tamed aspects of ourselves. And we very much have the lobster, the reptilian brain. Even though it's simple, it is very much being pulled by the draw of the moon. And even though the moon is the collective consciousness, it also has an individual face. Carl Jung talks about that with the personal shadow and collective shadow. You'll see that you have 15 little dashes. Some people and scholars note that is the letter J in the Hebrew letter of things, as a thing of holiness, the letter for Jehovah. And it also has your gates of heaven, meaning that you're nearing the end of your journey, but you're not yet finished and you need to continue on. And as we continue on in our journey, we will enter into the sun, which is I awaken, because truth here becomes clear and the authentic self shines unobstructed. You know who you are, you take up space in your life, and you unashamedly act who you are. And this is very much where you have faith like a child. There's a child on a white horse, pure consciousness, and it's holding up a banner of its passions, waving, this is who I am, and it's very strong. Because we're learning to master our spiritual aspects of ourselves, because the lesson here is what I sought was always within me. And now you do have the 4 aspects of the sun, the 4 elements. You have the sun with all of its rays representing all aspects of the tarot cards, and it very much has its individual face. Success lies ahead if you keep to the path. And while the moon figure illustrated our hidden aspects, the sun very much illustrates the parts of us that we love and we know and we embrace. And it also, again, like the child, we want to have awe and wonder for life. Just have that true, simplistic, beautiful mind of, wow, this is our life. Because true spirituality isn't becoming enlightened and having spiritual experiences. I think because of a Western-driven culture mindset a lot of times, we're driven by the experience. We want the experience. And yes, Kundalini awakenings and having aha moments are very much part of the spiritual journey, but that is not the point of the spiritual journey. And this is where we very much do remember that to have faith like a child and to just be simple in that on-runner, to be totally present and just to be full of life and to see it with new eyes is very much part of the spiritual journey. And that true spirituality is very much in the everyday moments, because ultimately the sun reveals the importance of illuminating others, because we rise by lifting others up. We rise when we give, when we pour from the outflow of the light that is inside of us, that true beauty that illuminates us, that love that we have for ourselves. It then pours out into other people and we pour into them and we love them. We love our neighbor as ourselves. And so we rise by illuminating and lifting other people, by supporting other people, because we are all connected. Because after the sun comes judgment, I rise. Right here, resurrection occurs. People are raising from the dead. A higher self calls the soul into a new way of being, because the lesson is very much awakened to who you truly are. You see very much the central figure is Archangel Gabriel. He is blowing the trumpet. He is sounding it to wake the dead. Now, it is natural to feel connected to humans in this card, but the angel can also be a part of us. We need to realize that the angel represents our ability to wake up from old beliefs through education and epiphanies. When the Son of Man strikes like lightning from the east to the west, you come enlightened. You're like, oh my God, it makes sense now. You're waking up to a new way of being. Judgment Day happens every day with you. Every day you are waking up and being called into a new level of consciousness, and you have to awaken. You need to answer the call to action to create new opportunity in your life. And our final one is the world. I am whole. The journey comes to a full circle and the soul recognizes unity with life, the cosmos, and the divine. Because the lesson here very much with the world is everything you have worked together for is coming together, and the seeker and the sought are one. That they may be one. I and the Father are one. If you knew me, you would know the Father. When you completely master yourself and you gain the wisdom on all planes, you fully embody that divinity completely to the fullest. And if you notice, the top half of her body is looking left and then her feet are going right. But she's kind of standing in the middle, and that's because she's right there. It's the balance of opposites, past and future, and she's in the present moment. That is what that's representing. And then she also has two wands. Well, you'll notice the magician and most of the people have one wand, which very much represents the conscious I. The woman holds two, which is the conscious I and the conscious you, because we are not separate. That they may be one, universe. We are all interconnected. And the enlightened soul realizes that. They realize to hurt my neighbor would be to hurt myself, is because it's ultimately to hurt God. And that's what we all are. This is one big dharma, as the Hindu tradition might say. If you notice, you have the four heads, again, of the four zodiac, also a call back to the Wheel of Fortune. Circling the woman is a green wreath. The wreath symbolizes the cycles of life and the cycle of tarot. And if you also notice, the world signals the end of the current tarot journey, but it also signals the beginning of the second one. So it constantly goes, and that's why you have the fiery red passion binding it together, continuing on till the end of times. And she also has very much a purple sash around her, which is royalty. Because you are what? Of a royal priesthood, that you are sons and daughters of what? The King Most High. You can partake in that inheritance. When you embody your divinity, the authority given to you, you are of a royal lineage. So as you can see, the Major Arcana, the major secrets of the soul, is very much a map of consciousness, of build thyself, the identity, know thyself, wisdom, and transcend thyself, unity. Because the language found across mystical traditions is very much that. The physical journey very much does teach identity in mystical traditions. And then in the mental journey and on the mental plane, the mental journey teaches wisdom. Truly learning mastery of self, mastery of knowing and understanding. And then on the spiritual plane, the spiritual journey teaches unity. The fool begins believing that they are separate from life. And then the world ends with the realization that they never were.